Rome did it, Spain did it, Germany did it, and every single time the result was the same: collapse. Not gradual decline, not a gentle correction, total, catastrophic, irreversible collapse. And right now, America is following the exact same playbook. The Federal Reserve has printed more money in the last 5 years than in the entire previous century combined. They call it stimulus. They call it quantitative easing. They call it monetary policy. But history has a different name for it: suicide by printing press. Every empire that debased its currency believed it was the exception. Every empire believed it could print its way to prosperity, and every single one was wrong. Today, we're going to trace the exact pattern that destroyed the greatest civilizations in history. And then, we're going to hold that pattern up against what's happening right now. Because the question isn't whether this pattern repeats. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. The question is whether we're already too far gone to stop it. Rome's fatal coin. In 211 AD, Rome minted the denarius with nearly pure silver. It was the backbone of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Soldiers were paid in it. Trade flourished because of it. Nations trusted it. But empires are expensive. Wars cost money. Bread and circuses cost money. And when the treasury ran dry, Roman emperors discovered something seductive. They didn't need to mine more silver. They could just put less silver in each coin. They could cheat the system, and nobody would notice. Emperor Nero started it. He reduced the silver content by 10%, just a little shave. Nobody noticed. So the next emperor shaved a little more, and the next, and the next. By 268 AD, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. The coin looked the same, but it was worth almost nothing. Prices exploded. A measure of wheat that cost half a denarius in the 2nd century cost 100 denarii by the 3rd century. Soldiers refused to fight for worthless coins. Trade routes collapsed because merchants wouldn't accept Roman currency. The empire didn't fall because of barbarians at the gates. The barbarians walked through gates that were already rusting because nobody could afford to maintain them. But Rome's story is just the beginning of this pattern, because centuries later, another empire made the exact same mistake with an even more valuable metal: Spain's gold trap. When Spanish conquistadors flooded Europe with gold and silver from the Americas, everyone thought Spain had won the lottery. Unlimited wealth. Ships loaded with treasure arrived month after month. Spain had more gold than any nation in history, and that was precisely the problem. See, here's what nobody tells you about the Spanish Empire. They didn't invest that gold. They didn't build infrastructure. They didn't develop industry. They spent it. And they flooded the European economy with so much precious metal that prices across the continent doubled, then tripled, then quadrupled. Historians call it the price revolution. More money chasing the same amount of goods equals inflation. Spanish wages couldn't keep up. Spanish manufacturing collapsed because it was cheaper to import everything. The very gold that was supposed to make Spain invincible made it dependent, lazy, and ultimately bankrupt. The abundance of money ruins everything. A Spanish economist warned them in 1556, 470 years ago. They didn't listen. Spain went from the most powerful empire on earth to declaring bankruptcy 4 times in a single century. If this revelation is making you think differently about wealth and money, hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide. Because what comes next is where the pattern gets truly terrifying. Weimar's bonfire. November 1923. Berlin. A woman carries a wheelbarrow full of German marks to the bakery, not to buy bread, to buy a single loaf. One loaf, millions of marks. This is what happened when the Weimar Republic decided to print its way out of debt. After World War I, Germany owed crippling reparations to the Allied powers. The government's solution was elegant in its simplicity and catastrophic in its execution. They printed money, not a little, not even a lot. They printed money until the numbers lost all meaning. In January 1921, $1 bought 64 German marks. By November 1923, $1 bought 4.2 trillion marks. The currency had become less valuable than the paper it was printed on. People burned banknotes for heat because firewood was more expensive. Life savings evaporated overnight. A pension that could buy a house in 1918 couldn't buy a cup of coffee in 1923. The middle class was completely and utterly destroyed. And here's the part they don't teach you in school. This wasn't just an economic crisis. This was a deliberate wealth transfer. The industrialists who owned real assets, factories, land, gold, they emerged richer than ever. It was the ordinary German who lost everything. And the desperation this created, it opened the door to something far worse. But that political consequence isn't our focus today. Our focus is the mechanism. Because that same mechanism is operating right now in a country you know very well. The 1971, August 15th, 1971. A Sunday evening. President Richard Nixon appeared on television and in 17 minutes fundamentally changed the global financial system. Nixon's shock. He severed the last link between the US dollar and gold. Before that moment, every dollar was backed by a specific amount of gold stored in Fort Knox. Foreign governments could exchange their dollars for gold at $35 per ounce. It was a promise, a contract, and Nixon broke it. He told the American people it was temporary. I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. Temporarily. That was 55 years ago. Temporary became permanent. Now think about what this means. Before 1971, the government couldn't just print unlimited dollars because every dollar had to be backed by gold. After 1971, there was no anchor, no constraint, no limit. The printing press was unleashed. And if you look at virtually every chart of government debt, money supply, wealth inequality, and housing prices, they all have one thing in common. They all went parabolic after 1971. The very foundation of American money was removed in a single evening. But removing the gold standard was just step one. What came next was the machinery that would accelerate the debasement beyond anything Rome or Spain could have imagined. The Fed's machine. Here's something that should disturb you. The Federal Reserve is not federal. It has no reserves, and it has the power to create money from nothing. Not federal, no reserves. When the government needs money, it doesn't go to its savings account. It doesn't cut spending. It issues bonds, essentially IOUs, and the Federal Reserve buys them. With what money? Money it creates with a keystroke, not printed, not earned, not taxed, created out of thin air. Every dollar created dilutes the value of every dollar you already hold. This is the modern version of Rome shaving silver from its coins. The coins look the same. The numbers in your bank account look the same, but what they can BUI shrinks every single year. In the year 2000, the Federal Reserve's balance sheet was about $700 billion. By 2008, it was $900 billion. Then the financial crisis hit, and they went on a printing spree that would make the Weimar Republic blush. By 2024, the Federal Reserve balance sheet had ballooned past $7 trillion. $7 trillion. A tenfold increase in less than 2 decades. And every single dollar of that was created from nothing, backed by nothing, and owed by you, the taxpayer. But the truly insidious part isn't the printing itself. It's who benefits from it and who pays the price. The wealth theft. When the Federal Reserve creates trillions of new dollars, where does that money go first? Not to you. Not to small businesses. Not to the working class. It goes to Wall Street. Wall Street first. This is called the Cantillon effect, named after an 18th century economist who noticed something crucial. When new money enters the economy, the people closest to the source benefit the most. They get to spend the new money before prices rise. By the time that money trickles down to your paycheck, to your grocery store, to your gas station, prices have already adjusted upward. Inflation is taxation without legislation. Think about that. You never voted for this. No congressman stood up and said, we're going to reduce your purchasing power by 7% this year. But that's exactly what happened. In 2022, while average Americans watched their grocery bills climb 30%, the 10 richest people in the world added $150 billion to their combined wealth. The money printer doesn't create wealth, it transfers wealth. From the bottom to the top, from savers to borrowers, from the responsible to the reckless. Your savings, their profit. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It's monetary policy, and it's functioning exactly as designed. But the domestic damage is only half the story. Because when you're the world's reserve currency, your printing press doesn't just affect your own citizens. Petrodollar deal. In 1974, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia that changed everything. The Saudis would sell their oil exclusively in US dollars. In return, America would provide military protection. Every nation on Earth that wanted oil now needed American dollars. This was genius, pure, calculated genius, because it meant that global demand for dollars was essentially unlimited. Every country needed dollars not because they trusted America, but because they needed to buy energy. This artificial demand is what allowed the US to print trillions without experiencing Weimar-style hyperinflation. The rest of the world was absorbing the inflation for them. America exported its inflation to every nation on the planet. When the Fed prints money, the dollar should collapse. But because everyone needs dollars for oil, the demand cushion softens the blow. It's like having a credit card with no limit because the entire world is forced to pay your minimum balance. World pays America prints. But here's the thing about deals made at gunpoint. They don't last forever. Saudi Arabia is now accepting Chinese yuan for oil. Russia sells in rubles. The BRICS nations are actively building alternative payment systems. Privilege unearned is privilege that can be lost. The very mechanism that protected America from the consequences of its own printing is being dismantled piece by piece. And what happens when that protection disappears? History already has the answer. Debt spiral. As of today, the United States national debt exceeds $36 trillion. Let that number sink in. 36 trillion. If you spent $1 every second, it would take you over 1 million years to spend $36 trillion. But the number itself isn't the scariest part. The scariest part is the interest. The US government now pays over $1 trillion per year just in interest on its debt. That's more than it spends on the military, more than it spends on education, more than it spends on healthcare. 1. National debt, over $36 trillion. 2. Annual interest, over $1 trillion. 3. Interest exceeds military spending. 4. Debt growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. And here's the trap that every empire falls into. To pay the interest on the debt, you need to borrow more money, which creates more debt, which requires more interest payments, which requires more borrowing. It's a mathematical spiral, with only one possible ending. Rome tried to escape this spiral by debasing its coins. Spain tried to escape it with stolen gold. Weimar tried to escape it with the printing press. Every single one of them failed, because the math always wins. The United States is now adding $1 trillion to its debt every 100 days. Not every year, every 100 days. And the question that keeps historians awake at night is not if this ends, but when. And what comes next reveals why this time might be even more dangerous. The digital trap. Every empire that debased its currency eventually tried to control its citizens to prevent the consequences. Rome imposed price controls. Weimar Germany restricted foreign exchange. And now, the modern solution is emerging. Central bank digital currencies. CBDC. Total financial control. Over 130 countries representing 98% of global GDP are now exploring or developing CBDC. This isn't speculation. This is happening. And here's what they don't tell you. A CBDC isn't just digital money. It's programmable money. The government could set expiration dates on your money, forcing you to spend it. They could restrict what you buy, where you buy it, and how much you buy. They could turn off your ability to transact with a single keystroke. When money becomes code, your freedom becomes permission. Think about what happened during recent global events. Bank accounts were frozen for political protesters. Payment processors cut off individuals and organizations for their beliefs. Now imagine that power amplified 1,000-fold, built directly into the currency itself. This is not about efficiency. This is about control. Every empire in history, when its currency started failing, turned to authoritarianism to maintain power. The tools are different. The pattern is identical. And this brings us to the ultimate question, the one this entire video has been building toward. Are we next? So let's return to the question in the title. Are we next? Let's lay out the pattern one final time. Print, inflate, collapse, repeat. Step 1. An empire accumulates massive debt through military expansion and domestic spending. Step 2. To fund that debt, the empire debases its currency, whether by shaving coins, flooding markets with gold, or printing trillions from thin air. Step 3. Inflation destroys the middle class while enriching those closest to the money supply. Step 4. The empire tries to maintain control through authoritarianism, surveillance, and forced compliance. Step 5. Trading partners lose confidence and abandon the currency. Step 6. Collapse. America has now completed steps 1 through 5. The debt is astronomical. The printing press is running at full speed. Inflation has gutted the middle class. Digital surveillance is expanding, and nations are abandoning the dollar. The pattern is not a warning anymore. It is a diagnosis. Now, am I saying America will collapse tomorrow? No. Rome took centuries, Spain took decades, Weimar took years. The timeline varies. But the destination, the only thing we learn from history, is that we learn nothing from history. The destination has never changed, not once. In the entire recorded history of human civilization, every empire that printed money collapsed. Every single one. So what do you do with this knowledge? You can't stop the Federal Reserve. You can't vote out the pattern that has repeated for 3,000 years. But you can understand it. And understanding is the first step to protecting yourself. Knowledge of the pattern is your greatest financial weapon. Learn about hard assets. Understand what holds value when paper doesn't. Question every narrative that tells you this time is different, because it never is. The Romans thought they were different. The Spanish thought their gold made them invincible. The Germans thought their industrial might would save them. They were all wrong. Learn, question, protect, survive. The pattern doesn't care about your politics. It doesn't care about your nationality. It doesn't care about your feelings. It only cares about math. And the math right now is screaming. If you made it this far, comment debased empire to prove you see the pattern that most people are still blind to. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about? The truth is out there. You just have to follow the money. Like and subscribe to keep exposing what they don't want you to see.